Welcome, especially if this is your first time with us. A question to direct your thoughts as we approach our Bible passage today. What do you do if the leaders of your religion are evil? Well, some of you are saying you could leave your church and go to another church. But let me change the question a little. What do you do if the leaders of the one true religion are evil? That's the situation we're going to be looking at today as we continue our studies in the first book of Samuel, 1 Samuel. And we've been hearing about a man called Elkanah and his wife Hannah and their gift of their son Samuel to work for God. And when we studied chapter 1, we read about what we may have thought to be a very pure religion. Their act of public worship each year was to go and to offer a sacrifice to God at his tabernacle, the tent Moses had erected, which stood in a place called Shiloh. And we heard about the peace offering, this offering which part of it went to God to be offered on the altar by fire, and part of it went to the priests as their wages for doing the work of God, and part was returned to the worshippers to eat, to share with their family and their friends, as a wonderful display of the fellowship that existed between God, his priests, and the worshippers. But that first chapter only gave us the slightest clues that something was terribly, terribly wrong with that system of worship. Yes, it was a system that God himself had set up, that he himself had provided for in Leviticus chapter 3. And yes, Elkanah and his family were devoted to the true God, unlike so many of Israel's people at that time. But the one place to worship the true God, that tabernacle at Shiloh, the priests there were corrupt. Today we're going to be looking at 1 Samuel chapter 2, verses 12 to 36. My name is Keith Simons. I'm a Bible teacher from England, presenting these talks, how to understand the King James Version of the Bible, using a different section of the Bible each time. Today, as I've said, if you're turning to it, we begin at 1 Samuel, chapter 2 and verse 12, which has a truly shocking statement to begin with. Now the sons of Eli were sons of Belial. They knew not the Lord. Let's remember who Eli was, the chief priest. Let's remember what happened when the chief priest died. His son became chief priest after him. Eli was by this time a very old man. He wasn't able to do much of the work of God at the tabernacle, at God's house. So his sons were taking over and doing the work, but they were sons of Belial. In other words, they were very evil people. They lived worthless lives. Lives that were selfish, lives where they lived for themselves. And what's more, they knew not the Lord, God's priests, the most important priests whom God had appointed to lead the religion of Israel, and they didn't even know the God who they were serving. They cared not about him. They were rebellious against him. And suddenly, we're in a state of shock because this young boy, Samuel, has been given to work for God, has been dedicated for his whole life to work for God amongst priests who knew not the Lord. Okay, so what were they doing wrong? Let's read verse 13. And the priest's custom with the people was that when any man offered sacrifice, the priest's servant came, while the flesh was in seething, with a flesh hook of 3 teeth in his hand. Okay, the flesh is seething, it's boiling, an old-fashioned word. The flesh means the meat. So we're talking now about the meat which at these peace offerings, which we've discussed, was given back to the people to eat themselves. Now, Leviticus chapter 7 and verse 35 is very clear about what the priest gets from this. He gets the meat of the breast and the shoulder. In other words, that joint of meat belongs to him as his wages for working for God. But the people have offered that, they've given that piece of meat, and they're boiling the meat in a casserole, something like that, and the priest's servant would come along, and he was carrying a flesh hook, a fork, we would say today, a 3-pronged fork. Verse 14, and he struck it into the pan, or kettle, or cauldron, or pot, whatever it was they were using for cooking. All that the flesh hook brought up, the priest took for himself. So they did in Shiloh unto all the Israelites that came thither. So the priest's servant would take this 3-pronged fork, he would stab it into the pan, and it would obviously lodge on some of the meat, and whatever meat he randomly hit and brought out of that pot, he took away for himself. What were the priests doing? They were stealing from the people, from the worshippers. They were stealing meat that didn't belong to them. It gets worse. That was only stealing from the people. But what about stealing from God? Leviticus chapter 3 verse 3 declares that the fat from those sacrifices belonged to God, that it should be cut away and it should be put on the fire, on the altar, and it burned, and as the smoke rose up from it, it was pleasing to God. It was a sort of prayer to God. Verse 15, also before they burnt the fat, the priest's servant came and said to the man that sacrificed, give flesh to roast for the priest, for he will not have sodden flesh of thee, but raw. Sodden, that's a word we still use. It's been raining heavily here in England today, and the ground is absolutely sodden, soaked. So what the servant is saying here is that the priest will not accept meat that's been boiled because it's wet. He wants raw meat, and he wants raw meat because he wants to roast it. He preferred roast meat. And he prefers roast meat because it's more fatty, it's a more luxurious thing. Verse 16, and if any man said unto him, let them not fail to burn the fat presently, and then take as much as thy soul desireth, then he would answer him, nay, but thou shalt give it me now, and if not, I will take it by force. So the man wants God's law to be obeyed. He's urging the priest via his servant. He's saying to the servant, well, I'm happy to give you whatever the priests want. I'm not going to limit them to the piece which God's law says that they need. But just one thing, let them be sure to burn the fat. Let them give to God the fat that belongs to him by his law, and then I'll let you have even more than you, the priests, are entitled to. But if any man said that to the priest's servant, the priest's servant would threaten violence to force them to hand over the meat that he wanted with the fat, so that the fat was not going to God. these priests are stealing from men, and they're stealing from God. Verse 17, wherefore, for that reason, the sin of the young men was very great before the Lord. The young men meaning the young priests. These priests, the sons of Eli, who soon will become the chief priests in Israel and who are already doing much of his work, their sin was very great. Why? For men abhorred the offering of the Lord. Because people hated it. They hated to give sacrifices in this way. They wanted to follow the pure and right religion. That's why they'd taken their sacrifices to God's tabernacle at Shiloh, the one place of true religion, the one place where God had said his people should offer sacrifices. And the people hated that they were doing it. And it was these young priests who were causing the people to hate it. And some of those people would decide that it wasn't worth going up to Shiloh and being robbed. And some of them maybe wouldn't give those gifts to God. Or they would take those gifts and they would go to a local priest of a pagan religion. And they would give their gifts, they would give their animals in a false religion. No wonder God considered the sin of those priests to be very great. What's happening to this young boy, Samuel, in this situation? Verses 18 and 19. But Samuel ministered before the Lord, being a child, girded with a linen ephod, a garment of linen. Moreover, his mother made him a little coat, an outer garment, and brought it to him from year to year when she came up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. So the parents are still coming to Shiloh each year to offer the sacrifices, and Samuel is, as a child, ministering before God. Childlike faith, purity of worship, even in a corrupt atmosphere. This child is learning to serve God faithfully. And his parents are still caring for him. Each year, his mother makes him a coat, makes him clothes because she wants to provide for her son, even though he's working for God under the supervision of the priests. They're still caring. Verse 20, and Eli, the chief priest, blessed Elkanah and his wife, the parents of Samuel, and said, the Lord give thee seed of this woman for the loan which is lent to the Lord. He didn't mean seed as you plant in your garden. It was a way of saying children and future descendants. You've given Samuel as a loan to God, so may God give you more children. And they went unto their own home, verse 21, and the Lord visited Hannah. The Lord visited, a beautiful way the Bible speaks. When God answers prayer, God visits the person, so that she conceived and bare 3 sons and 2 daughters, obviously not all at the same time. And the child Samuel grew before the Lord. Yes, he's growing, not just growing as a boy grows, but growing before the Lord, growing in his relationship with God and his knowledge of God. But what about these sons, the sons of the chief priest Eli, who are so evil? Verse 22. Now Eli was very old, and heard all that his sons did unto all Israel, the way they robbed from their sacrifices, and how they lay with the women that assembled at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. Yes, there were women like an army of women that's suggested by the Hebrew words. An army of women who performed tasks, we think, at the house of God. They repaired the cloth, they prepared the furnishings, they cleaned, they did physical work there. But what's happening to these pure, these holy women, these women devoted to good works and to prayer? Well, Eli's sons, the young priests, lay with them. In other words, these young priests, as if it wasn't enough to rob from the worshippers and to rob from God, were taking these holy women and using them for sex. And at this, Eli couldn't control himself anymore. He'd allowed everything to go on that was going on until now, but at this he spoke to his sons. Verse 23, "Why do ye such things? For I hear of your evil dealings by all this people. All the people are telling me what you're doing, and it's wrong." Verse 24, "Nay, no, my sons, for it is no good report that I hear. Ye make the Lord's people to transgress." You're causing God's people to sin. You're turning them away from the true God. Verse 25, "If one man shall sin against another, the judge shall judge him. But if a man sin against the Lord, who shall entreat for him?" You're doing a terrible thing here. Who's going to intercede for you? Who's going to stand between you and God with these evil deeds? You're sinning not against a person, but against God. But notice what Eli doesn't say. He doesn't say to them, "You must stop this." He's complained about what's wrong. He doesn't remove them from the priesthood. He doesn't force them to leave the tabernacle at Shiloh. He doesn't punish them. But Eli is God's chief priest, who has authority on behalf of God over the tabernacle. But he's too weak. He's not standing firm in this situation. He complains, but he doesn't act. And nor do they. Notwithstanding, in spite of everything their father says to them, they hearkened not unto the voice of their father. Why? Because the Lord would slay them. God's judgment was already against them. It was a judgment of death. And that's why they couldn't listen to anything their father said about this matter, because they were determined in their course which would lead to their deaths and to the judgment of God. Verse 27, a prophet comes to speak into this situation. "And there came a man of God unto Eli, and said to him, Thus saith the Lord." This is what God is saying. We often find those words at the beginning of prophecies. So these are now the words of God. Did I plainly appear unto the house of thy father when they were in Egypt, in Pharaoh's house? Thy father here means not Eli's immediate father, but Aaron, his ancestor from long ago. Yes, God did come to him when Israel's people were still in Egypt, and he chose Aaron to be Israel's chief priest. Aaron had two sons, Itamar and Eleazar, and Eli was a descendant of Aaron from the family of Itamar. Verse 28, "And did I choose him out of all the tribes of Israel to be my priest, to offer upon mine altar," that's to burn the sacrifices, and also to burn incense, that's a substance with a sweet smell when it burns, which was an act of devotion to God, to wear an ephod before me. We've had a mention of an ephod as the ordinary clothes that Samuel and the priests wore in verse 18, But Exodus 39 verses 2 and 5 describe the special ephod, the special clothes of the chief priest, which were very beautiful and wonderful. So that ephod distinguished Eli the chief priest from all the other priests. And God says, "Did I give unto the house of thy father all the offerings made by fire of the children of Israel?" That is, God gave him authority over all these offerings, over all the sacrifices. God made the rule that all those sacrifices had to be sacrificed before the priests of Israel at the tabernacle. They couldn't just go up to a local hill and offer the sacrifices there. God gave the priests authority over all those sacrifices, and he gave the chief priest authority over all of them, and that ephod to show his authority, and the duty to burn incense before God. Verse 29. Wherefore, or why? Wherefore kick ye at my sacrifice and at mine offering? Kick, like an animal kicks, like a horse might kick the person who feeds it. It's a terrible thing. If an animal kicks the person who is looking after it, but the priests who had the responsibility to offer the sacrifices to God, they were behaving like those ungrateful animals, which are the sacrifice and offering, the verse continues, which I have commended in my habitation, in God's dwelling place, in God's holy tent. And why, the verse continues, honourest thou thy sons above me, to make yourselves fat with the chiefest of all the offerings of Israel, my people. God is saying Eli is giving more honour to his sons than to God, because Israel's priests are making themselves fat with the best part of all the gifts that the people of Israel bring to God. This is a terrible thing. The honour that is due to God is going to the priests. This always happens when the leadership of a religion, when the leadership of a church, the leadership of God's people becomes evil. The leaders set themselves in the place of God. The leaders demand loyalty to themselves instead of demanding loyalty to God. Or they take advantage. They take the things that belong to God and they claim them for themselves. And God's judgment is against that evil. Even when people are doing nothing, God's judgment is against it, and God will act. Verse 30, wherefore, for which reason, the Lord God of Israel saith, I said indeed that thy house and the house of thy father should walk before me forever. I declared, says God, that these priests, this family of priests, would always be my priests. But now the Lord saith, be it far from me. For them that honour me I will honour, and they that despise me shall be lightly esteemed. So the Lord had once said that Eli's family would always be priests, but now he's saying, no, it is those who honour God who will receive God's honour. God will support those who support him. But Eli's family had shown hate for God, and God would esteem them lightly. In other words, not at all. He would not give honour to such wicked people. Now, it's important to realise that God isn't going back on his promise to Aaron's family, but he's finding a way to continue the priesthood without the family of Eli. And although they would continue to be priests, that family would no longer have the important position as the chief priests of Israel. So what's going to happen? Verse 31. Behold, look, the days come that I will cut off thine arm and the arm of thy father's house. Okay, the word arm here is a word picture. An arm symbolizes a person's strength. You lift heavy weights with your arm. So it symbolizes the power that a person has. God is saying, I'll take away your power, your authority, the authority that you have as Israel's chief priest. And in the future, your family will not continue to have that authority. That there shall not be an old man in thine house, an elder, one with authority to rule. The sons of Eli would die at a young age. But here, this reference to an old man seems to signify an elder, a person with authority. The chief priests would no longer come from Eli's family. Verse 32, and thou shalt see an enemy in my habitation. The margin there reads, the affliction of the tabernacle. The habitation is God's house, and now God's house would have great troubles. The Ark of the Covenant, the most sacred object in Israel, will be taken away from the tabernacle. God will be acting in judgment against Shiloh until Shiloh lost its importance as a place where all Israel's people worshipped. God was acting against this wicked priesthood. In all the wealth which God shall give Israel, and there shall not be an old man in thine house forever. Yes, God is going to do great things for Israel, but Eli's family would lose its position as Israel's elders. Verse 33, and the man of thine, whom I shall not cut off from mine altar, shall be to consume thine eyes, and to grieve thine heart. It's a terrible thing that these priests would be doing, and now terrible things are going to happen to them. People are going to look at them, and their eyes are going to be consumed with weeping at sorrow to see how awful the things are that have happened to them. And the heart of the people looking on, is going to grieve to see what happened to this family of priests at Shiloh. And all the increase of thine house shall die in the flower of their age, just as Eli's sons would die, not as old men like Eli was, but they would die in the flower of their age, when they were still in the prime of life, healthy and strong men. Verse 34, and this shall be a sign unto thee, that shall come upon thy two sons, on Hophni and Phinehas. The names of these two sons, the priests who were doing such evil acts. In one day they shall die, both of them. And God continues with the wonderful vision of the future. Because turning from Eli's family, God is going to have a priest. And he's going to have a king in spite of all the evil of Eli's family. God declares in verse 35, and I will raise me up a faithful priest that shall do according to that which is in mine heart and in my mind. And I will build him a sure house, and he shall walk before mine anointed forever. Mine anointed, God's king. Yes, God is going to establish a new priest from a different family to rule over his house. And that priest will walk in harmony, in unity with God's anointed, God's king. We read how that happened in 1 Kings 1:39 and then again in 1 Kings 2:26 to 27. During David's life, there were two chief priests, one from the family of Eli still, and one Zadok, the faithful priest, who seems to come from the family of Eleazar, the other son of Aaron. Yes, that priest was going to anoint Solomon king, and then in harmony with Solomon to build the temple. But it's looking beyond this, to the unity of God's king and God's priest, to the time of God's Messiah, who is both king and priest, serving God in perfect harmony and in faithfulness to God. But one last look in verse 36 at Eli's family. They are going to continue to be priests, even in spite of the fact that God has removed the authority from them. They're still going to have some role or some part, but they'll have to ask for permission for it, because God declares, "It shall come to pass, it will happen, that every one that is left in thine house shall come and crouch to him, to the faithful priest, for a piece of silver and a morsel of bread." So the members of Eli's family who live, they're going to go to Zadok, to the faithful priest, and say, "I can't earn anything. Please let me have a role where I can earn a bit of money and the food I need to live." And he'll say, "Put me, I pray thee, please put me into one of the priest's offices, that I may eat a piece of bread. Give me a minor role as a priest. I know my family has been cut off from these great and important roles they once had. I know we can't be the chief priest anymore, or an important priest with great authority, but surely there's some little job I can do just to earn a living for myself and my family." And so it is that God deals with the corruption of Eli's family, and he's appointing his king and his faithful priest. But what's missing in this chapter? What's missing in what Eli does? How should he react in this situation? Repentance? Putting things right? Ordering these corrupt priests to leave their duties? What about prayer, humility, fasting before God and weeping before God? We read of Eli doing nothing of this. Eli does seem to us to be someone who in a very, very weak way is loyal to the true God. But how weak that he's allowed such corruption to happen. Oh, that we would turn from any wrong and evil ideas. It was selfishness that drove those young men into destroying the priesthood as they knew it. It was the work of God that led new leaders, new priests, that rearranged Israel so that the time of David would come, the time of Solomon would come, and many, many years later, the time of Messiah would come to Israel. Please write to me. My email address, 333kjv@gmail.com. I'm about to read you the whole of the passage we've just been looking at, 1 Samuel chapter 2, starting at verse 12 to the end of the chapter from the King James Bible. But if you could drop me a note, let me know which country you're listening in. If you're in the United States, which state. If you could tell your friends about these talks, it would be lovely to have more people listening. 333kjv@gmail.com. And now here is the whole of 1 Samuel chapter 2, beginning at verse 12. Now, the sons of Eli were sons of Belial. They knew not the Lord. And the priest's custom with the people was that when any man offered sacrifice, the priest's servant came while the flesh was in seething with a flesh hook of 3 teeth in his hand, and he struck it into the pan or kettle or cauldron or pot. All that the flesh hook brought up, the priest took for himself. So they did in Shiloh unto all the Israelites that came thither. Also, before they burnt the fat, the priest's servant came and said to the man that sacrificed, Give flesh to roast for the priest, for he will not have sodden flesh of thee, but raw. And if any man said unto him, Let them not fail to burn the fat presently, and then take as much as thy soul desireth, then he would answer him, Nay, but thou shalt give it me now, and if not, I would take it by force. Wherefore the sin of the young men was very great before the Lord, for men abhorred the offering of the Lord. But Samuel ministered before the Lord, being a child, girded with a linen ephod. Moreover, his mother made him a little coat, and brought it to him from year to year, when she came up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. And Eli blessed Elkanah and his wife, and said, The Lord give thee seed of this woman for the loan which is lent to the Lord. And they went unto their own home, and the Lord visited Hannah, so that she conceived and bare 3 sons and 2 daughters. And the child Samuel grew before the Lord. Now Eli was very old, and heard all that his sons did unto all Israel, and how that they lay with the women that assembled at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And he said unto them, Why do ye such things? For I hear of your evil dealings by all this people. Nay, my sons, for it is no good report that I hear. Ye make the Lord's people to transgress. If one man sin against another, the judge shall judge him. But if a man sin against the Lord, who shall entreat for him? Notwithstanding, they hearkened not unto the voice of their father, because the Lord would slay them. And the child Samuel grew on, and was in favour both with the Lord and also with men. And there came a man of God unto Eli, and said unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Did I plainly appear unto the house of thy father when they were in Egypt in Pharaoh's house? And did I choose him out of all the tribes of Israel to be my priest, to offer upon mine altar, to burn incense, and to wear an ephod before me? And did I give unto the house of thy father all the offerings made by fire of the children of Israel? Wherefore kick ye at my sacrifice and at mine offering, which I have commanded in my habitation, and honourest thy sons above me, to make yourselves fat with the chiefest of all the offerings of Israel, my people. Wherefore the Lord God of Israel saith, I said indeed that thy house and the house of thy father should walk before me forever. But now the Lord saith, Be it far from me. For them that honour me I will honour, and they that despise me shall be lightly esteemed. Behold, the days come that I will cut off thine arm, and the arm of thy father's house, and there shall not be an old man in thine house. And thou shalt see an enemy in my habitation, in all the wealth which God shall give Israel, and there shall not be an old man in thine house forever. And the man of thine, whom I shall not cut off from mine altar, shall be to consume thine eyes, and to grieve thine heart, and all the increase of thine house shall die in the flower of their age. And this shall be a sign unto thee that shall come upon thy 2 sons, on Hophni and Phinehas. In one day they shall die, both of them. And I will raise me up a faithful priest, that shall do according to that which is in mine heart and in my mind. And I will build him a sure house, and he shall walk before mine anointed forever. And it shall come to pass that every one that is left in thine house shall come and crouch to him for a piece of silver and a morsel of bread, and shall say, Put me, I pray thee, into one of the priest's offices, that I may eat a piece of bread.